preparing to live stream the meeting, and I'll tell you when I'm going to say welcome to FederationX when we go live.
I think we just did.
Hello and welcome to FederationX, our regular discussion of Israeli, Palestinian, and binational topics between people across the different party lines.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel from Israel, and I'm happy to be back on FederationX.
I'm Iyad, Australian Palestinian, happy to be on FederationX.
And I'm Lee from Sydney, and welcome to FederationX.
So today we're going to talk about Zionism. If you're going to have a shared future with all the people on the land, as in a federation, what happens to it? So I think that Iyad has a lot to say about that in particular.
I do.
Yes.
Well, Zionism to me is, in effect, racism against Palestinians. Right? Yes, it's emancipation of Jews from anti-Semitism in Europe, but the Palestinians had nothing to do with the anti-Semitism. Yet they wore and are still wearing the brunt of it. And so that's the question today. Has Zionism outworn its welcome by now that we're in the 21st century? Many Israelis that I've been and Jews that I've been debating with think not. And that's the discussion for today.
Okay. I think that the problem with Zionism is that it's not what it used to be. When Zionism started out, and I have an argument with Iyad there regarding its origins, Iyad claims that it's of Christian origin. I don't think so, but that's not really relevant for this particular claim. That the fact it started out, it was necessary because the Jews definitely needed a home country, and Zionism was the way to make it happen. And it did so exceptionally well. And by 1948, the Jewish state was created under difficult circumstances, but it was done.
Yep.
And at that time, Zionism should have said, "Okay, we did our job because that was the job," and should have signed off and let something else come up. Yep. But it didn't, and that's the problem we're dealing with it, because since then Zionism has not developed in the positive sense. It has developed as an ethnocentric movement that is becoming more ethnocentric as we speak, at the same time as Israel includes more and more non-Jews.
So I think we're in agreement that it should have ended in 1948. But what created Israel's independence also created the Palestinian Nakba, right?
Yes.
And I question whether the Jews of Europe, if they came with the endless wealth that they came in with to buy contiguous land and dispossess Palestinians, if they came in a peaceful manner and built a country for both peoples, whether we wouldn't have had the same, if not a better outcome for the Jews and the Palestinians.
First of all, there wasn't an endless wealth which made it possible to buy things. Jews bought only 4%, I think, of the privately held land in Palestine at the time, so that wasn't a big thing. Okay, I think in generally speaking, the headline of the operation was that for people without a land without people. There was a lack of recognition that there's a relatively large population there, and there was a lack of forethought how to handle it. It was done occasionally. It was done in negotiating, and there were lots of efforts to do things in peace with the local Palestinian population. But overall, the result speaks for itself.
Well, and I agree with that. And while Israelis might have been negotiating with wealthy landholders or manipulating land deals, right? There was no negotiation with the farmers who made up the bulk of the population.
Yes.
And really ended up starving or famished, right? The second question I want to raise is, now that Israel has much more than 80% of the land and most of it taken by force, right? The reason to negotiate with the Palestinians and find a middle ground has gone. Where in the early 19th century or 20th century, when they first arrived and the Palestinians held the land and held the population, there was reason for Israel or the Jews or the Zionists to negotiate.
Yeah,
But now that they've taken everything, where's the reason?
there's no, Iyad, your hand, okay. There's no need for Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians, other than to have no terror and have a peaceful atmosphere, and other than that, there's no reason. Israel is in charge. Israel has control. Israel's in power, and it doesn't need to accommodate with the Palestinians, and that's one of the problems of the conflict, that there's a big imbalance of power.
Well, also part of it too is that, in a sense, Israel is an accidental state. The very early Zionists were not predicting anything like the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire looked very stable when Zionism began, or at least like it wasn't going to go anywhere. And they were all expecting that everyone would be Ottoman nationals and everything would be resolved within Ottoman auspices.
Do you believe that?
What?
So, how far, when you say early Zionists, are you speaking about Herzl or before Herzl?
I'm talking about people like Herzl. If you look at Alt Newland, I believe that it portrayed the country not as an independent country, but as a region within the Ottoman Empire, which, by the way, was historically precedented. What?
It betrayed it as being run by the Jews, and it betrayed
autonomous area.
It was not a fully independent nation. And by the way, within Ottoman history, on that region that was historically precedented, there had been an incident of Jews being able to get their own little region in Tiberias.
The answer to all of that is yes, up to 1914, right?
Up to 1914.
When the Ottoman Empire started to crumble, there's no question that what led to the Balfour Declaration and then to the mandate was convoluted, but nonetheless, the Zionist Jews and Zionist Christians were seeing an Israeli state. In fact,
the Zionist Christians wanted to have, in addition to trying to get their religious views fulfilled somehow, they wanted also to get rid of the Jews in Great Britain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. All of that, but we still, well, even when we see the construct that was built by Herbert Samuel, right? It was a construct, and he admitted to build what they'd already called Eretz Israel, right?
He was a Zionist.
As early as 1921 or 22 across all of Palestine.
He was a Zionist.
And it was a subversive project, because if you read the Balfour Declaration, one, if it was going to be a state, it couldn't be a state for Jews without taking away the rights of the existing inhabitants.
I'm tired now.
The only condition in the Balfour Declaration is that the rights of the existing inhabitants not be infringed. The civil and religious rights of the existing inhabitants not be infringed.
Yeah, the Balfour Declaration maintains the rights of everybody there.
Yeah, the other thing is that can you turn that TV down? Yeah. The other thing that they talked about is a homeland in Palestine for the Jewish people, not Palestine becoming a homeland for the Jewish people. And they were very careful in their wording because it was debated in the British Parliament and everybody was saying, no, we don't want to turn Palestine into a Jewish state. We're just saying make a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine.
Yeah, it didn't specify a state.
Yeah, but their actions versus their words are two different things, right?
No, the actions of the British were, the British, I think, maintained plausible deniability. There was nothing clear about them.
Yes. Absolutely.
Like
and they made sure that their wording gave them the opportunity to maintain plausible deniability. I remember reading an article about a journalist who went to the Rome conference and he was a British journalist saying, so I'm going to give a talk about a Jewish state in Palestine. They said, no, don't use the word state. We're not using the word state. That will get the Arabs offside. So we're talking about a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So there was certainly an understanding, and even Rebecca, I take umbrage with the Zoolander because there is a whole dialogue that Herzl writes in the fictional story about an Arab, someone asking a Jewish person what the Arabs think, and an Arab replying saying, oh, look, they came here and they gave us prosperity and they rebuilt the land. What have we got to complain about?
Yeah, that's like wishful thinking.
Yeah.
It's like the Americans expecting the Iraqis to receive them with rice.
Yeah. And winning hearts and minds. Remember that campaign? Yeah.
Look, and Weitzman was very obvious when he said he picked the old English joke and he said, well, the camel's first got to get his leg in the tent, and then we all know what's going to happen next, right? And it's what's happened.
But we have to deal with the outcome. It's not, we have to do better than that. A lot better.
And the outcome has to be that Zionism has to end. It's got to be basically renounced, and we've got to find a way for the.
It won't be renounced. You don't renounce something. It dies a natural death. Okay, the way it dies is by putting something else in place which replaces it. That's the challenge. And I think the more you talk against Zionism, you'll just strengthen it. Okay, the thing is to put something up which is better.
And that's the problem is I think there's a lot of people in Israel who don't believe the Zionist project is finished. Until they've got the whole of the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan Heights, little bits of Jordan, maybe little bits. I heard an MK this week. I was reading that an MK in Parliament suggested that Israel should keep expanding into parts of Jordan and parts of Syria.
Yeah, I think I heard that too. Yeah, there are a few crazy guys. No, but the problem is that people identify Israel with Israel and Zionism is one and the same. Okay, so when you start talking against Zionism, mostly people feel that you're talking against Israel. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the big problem. So to talk against Zionism is very problematic in the context of what we want to achieve.
That's because of it. And there's a debate going on. I think Iyad was telling me at the moment of whether Zionism, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and that's a debate that's constantly had on social media.
Some of it definitely is. It's not
some of it,
not everything.
Yeah, there are racists who hide behind the anti-Zionism slogan, just as there are racists who hide, the anti-Semites who hide behind the anti-Israeli slogan.
Yeah.
But not everything that's said that's anti-Israeli or anti-Zionist
It's
is
anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitic.
Absolutely.
Yes, and part of it is that there are real inherent social problems. And if you criticize them in ways that don't pass their muster, then you could be called anti-Semitic. And also, and even their types of criticism, the Overton window can move. It used to be not acceptable to support an independent, not so acceptable to support an independent Palestinian state. It used to be not so acceptable to call Israeli presence and control over the West Bank and Gaza Strip an occupation. Now these are very mainstream.
Actually, in the 70s, Zionism was made, was regarded as a racist, was determined to be a racist ideology by the UN, and remained that way for probably about 5 or 6 years in the 70s.
Yeah, until it was repealed. But regarding the occupation, I think, Rebecca, you forget that basically occupation has been removed from the Israeli vocabulary almost completely. Almost completely. Wow. You won't encounter it in mainstream media at all. You'll only hear it from peace movements and very left-wing movements. You won't hear it in regular terminology, and not even the Labour Party talks about occupation.
That then removes it from being an occupation to annexation and apartheid, right?
No, it's just disputed territory. You get it all. You're getting it all wrong.
Well, it also depends who, what, where. Certainly in American pro-Israel rhetoric, occupation has
it's still there.
Occupation is still there. Like also.
But wasn't it at one stage normal to call it in Israel OTP?
No. It's not normal. That's only.
But it used to be. It used to be, didn't it?
It used to a long time ago. OTP went out the window in the Israeli dialogue already a long time ago.
But I want to come back to Rebecca's point, right? About Zionism having some form of legitimacy, right? And the answer is, let's do a litmus test with regular Israelis. Do they want someone to be racist against them? And are they accepting of someone being racist against anyone else? If not, then what is Zionism except racism against Palestinians?
They'll spend endless time to explain to you that it's not racist. They don't, like the camel doesn't see its own hump. Okay, they just don't recognize it.
Although, to be fair, they can be relatively indifferent to, say, a bunch of old world European style ethno-nationalisms. They might take the perspective, depending on the country, depending on the situation, of yes, these countries have a right to protect their own.
Racist. To be racist, yeah.
Well, I'm not a fan of old world style ethno-nationalism, and also Israelis, and as with everybody else, it depends, how does it affect you?
Yeah. We're as racist or not as regular Europeans. I don't think there's any special except with the difference maybe that we take it easier with racism against Arabs. It's more. Hold on, I have a phone call. I'll just mute and.
Must be one of your Zionist friends.
Well, plenty of Europeans also are quite racist against Arabs, and they respond to this by enacting explicitly anti-Muslim laws and having stricter immigration policies against Arabs. It's just that Israel has already a large population of Arabs under their control. But if you look at Spain, for example, Spain long ago kicked out the Arabs. Spain also used to be an Arab country, and the Arabs were expelled. The Moors were expelled, forcibly converted. They were given a way out. You have to convert to Catholicism and then you can stay. But
like they did with the Jews.
what? They did the same thing with the Jews.
With the Jews.
Yeah,
Yes.
they did that with the Jews as well.
Yes. And so so Spain, it's not taking back to this.
There isn't very many European countries that are controlling territories that are in dispute using a military, except for maybe Russia and Ukraine. You know, the territories that they've just recently annexed.
There's no analogy to what Israel's doing in the occupied territories, except maybe for Ukraine, you can claim that, but that's also a different story.
Yeah.
It is. All right. Well, I think we're all in agreement that we all think Zionism should have ended long ago, and its time has run its course, right?
It's not the only institution. It's not the only institution whose passing is long overdue.
Yeah.
But the way to get rid of it, or the way to realize it, coming up with something better, and that's what we're trying to do
with a federal system.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do with the federation.
Nature deplores a vacuum, and something will come in to fill it, and it may be worse than Zionism. So
I don't think. I think
you've got to come up with something that is acceptable first, and then replace Zionism with it.
Worse than what we have now in terms of Zionism is, I don't think we'll get at, but it's bad enough.
I'm glad you said it, because out of my words, it might have come out as racist.
Well, when you're racist, you're an Australian.
Yeah.
At least I'm racist against everybody equally, right?
Yeah.
Including my own kind.
Yeah. And also what I will say is that part of creating a new identity is, if you want to create a shared identity, Palestinians will never accept Zionism, especially as a group. That ship has sailed. It's like there is so much bad blood. Zionism has hurt them so much.
Yeah, I agree. That's clear.
So,
the Zionism is basically it's not a useful.
So asking Jews to give up Zionism, however, may be analogous to asking Palestinians to give up anti-Zionism. And
no, it's more difficult for Jews to give up
I can't
Zionism.
agree with that. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
You think it's more difficult?
It's much more difficult for Jews to give up Zionism than for the Palestinians to give. No, it's also difficult for the Palestinians to give up anti-Zionism. I don't think it's in the same.
Yeah, no, but why I disagree with it is Palestinians will easily give up, and they're not anti-Semitic, right? And we see Zionism as anti-Palestinian.
Well, I'm not so sure about the anti-Semitic part. There's been quite a lot of evidence, but it's understandable for them.
Yeah.
Jews or Israelis. Okay.
But if Jews came to the Palestinians today and said, "Let's put the past behind us and live in peace in one country with equal rights," they'll embrace it. They'll give up their hatred of the Zionist influence. That's why Palestinians are anti-Zionist. They're not really anti-Semitic. We're Semites, right?
Yeah, no, but that you take it's been a little more difficult, because they just don't differentiate between Jews and Israelis, the people on the ground. Okay, they just don't. So it's easier for us to say they're anti-Semitic. Okay, when it really is anti-Zionist more than anything else.
Yeah, and really, anti-Semitism is racism, but anti-Zionism is not necessarily racism.
Whereas Zionism is racism.
Well, I mean, that can be disputed, but the Zionism that is practiced today has become much more racist than anything before. So
I'm actually wondering if this is true.
We're measuring what racism is by increments now.
Well, I'm actually wondering if
Racism
this is true. Like, because also the Zionism that has practiced today has had some divergence culturally from the West. The Zionism that was practiced earlier was more closely tied to the West. So saying it's more racist, the West's sensibilities about racism have changed. And so in some respects, the Zionism that's practiced today has old style sensibilities within the West about
Zionism is an inclusive political culture, right?
Exclusive, not inclusive.
Sorry, exclusive, right?
Yeah.
But it completely excludes the Palestinians, so it's racist. Full stop by its definition.
I don't know. You know, I don't know whether you can call it. It's not racist if Israel would give equal rights to Palestinians. It's not racist, and that's not something which cannot be excluded. There is Zionism, a school of Zionism, which maintains that. Okay.
Well, I would say that more along the lines that
the last 100 years.
What?
I would say more along the lines that it quotas and tokenizes the Palestinians than that it completely excludes them. It will say to select number of Palestinians, yes, you can stay, yes, you can vote, yes, you can have your own political parties, and this is only a subset. It basically, and this is only a subset. The rest, they're just like, not in our backyard.
Yeah, right.
Zionism to Palestinians is Jewish-only roads, right? It's Palestinians having to go through checkpoints. It's the entire
occupation
apparatus that's built around the occupation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Zionism is to Palestinians. That is apartheid. That is racism.
And
right?
in fact, if Palestinians went back through the history, they would find that it started with Zionism.
That what started with Zionism?
All their oppression started with the rise of Zionism. So if you were Palestinian, you were projecting back, you know, it was the Zionist movement that came in and started taking over. It was the Zionist movement that declared that caused the Nakba when the state of Israel was and it's the Zionist movement that gives credence to settlements in the West Bank. It's a Zionist movement that denies them the right of return. So as a Palestinian, you couldn't see it as anything but racist.
No, you can argue it that way. I guess Zionists can argue also in a more positive way, especially in the beginning of Zionism. But again, if you measure it by the outcome, I agree.
It's the only way to measure it.
Yeah.
By the outcome, right? The Ku Klux Klan in America can argue that they live alongside the black people and it's all fine, right? But that doesn't stop them from being racist against black people, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And there was that, you know, separate but equal, the whole civil rights movement was opposed to. That went on for years, which was segregationist, which was apartheid, really.
Yeah, we're definitely the situation in the territories is more running more towards apartheid than it used to. In Israel, unfortunately, that's not so yet.
And now we're talking about making Zionism a law in Israel, right?
Adhering to Zionist values, which is, you know, we ask yourself, what are Zionist values? Okay.
Well, it's unleashing apartheid against Palestinians. That's what it is.
Like I said, I'll find it very hard to believe that they're actually going to table that law. And I think if they will, it'll bring out the people into the streets just as they did.
But nonetheless, that that in itself, the bringing it up in Parliament, right, and trying to attach it to the nation-state law tells you what it really means. It might mean something.
Oh,
to
no,
you guys
it's clear.
personally.
It's clear. It's
Yeah.
clear. It's a
Yeah.
purely racist law, and it's described as such by Haaretz and by the commentators.
Yeah. So to Israelis that think, yeah, but Zionism emancipated us. Sure, it emancipated you from Europe, right?
Yeah.
But you brought the anti-Semitism that was unleashed against you, right, onto the Palestinians under the guise of Zionism.
Well, Zionism, as it became known early on, say, was in essence porting of European-style ethno-nationalism to the Jews in the state of Israel. And
look, it wasn't in its day, based on the morals of the day, it wasn't considered an immoral or a racist movement. In the same way that colonialism wasn't considered a bad thing, it was actually something that countries boasted about. You know, the sun never set on Britain because it had so much colonial territories. And there's remnants of the fact that the Zionist movement tagged onto that colonial movement to convince the British to support it, because and remnants of that remain today, like, you know, the Israeli colonial bank, or there's societies that are still around that have got colonial in their names in Israel.
Oh, that's basis for that's part of a colonial movement, sure. That's not.
Yeah, and there's no, but it wasn't in its day seen to be a bad thing. It was, in fact, it was the opposite. You know, it was the West bringing civilization to the savages.
Colonization is good for you.
Yeah.
I'm a savage.
You Australians got to talk.
Yeah.
Somebody, and they're absolutely correct. We killed off the Aborigines a long time ago while it was still fashionable. So we don't have the problem anymore.
You don't have the problem anymore.
And the Americans did it with the Indians. You know, like it was, you know.
But the problem, timing is everything.
Timing is everything, and you know, it's like China and India are the most industrialized countries. They're the biggest perpetrators of global warming, because we've already had our turn.
Yeah,
we don't
need it anymore. Exactly.
Yeah. And this is also a place that historically and inherently the Jews can be at a disadvantage, because the Jews, there's always a question, are they really part of the dominant culture? So if they are part of the dominant culture, they tend to join it after the dominant culture is set. They don't tend to create the dominant culture, arguably with only few exceptions, one of which is the state of Israel, which is hardly a dominant culture at the world level, and is certainly not dominant if you're going to put it in the Western framework. It's kind of on the edge of being a Western country, a bit like Turkey. And so it can feel the need to prove itself as a Western country rather than set the trends of what that means. And so that's part of how Israel ended up later.
Rebecca, I want you to make me a promise.
What?
I want you to make me a promise.
What?
There's a document I circulated, and I'm happy to circulate again, called Deepening Apartheid by Oren Yiftekel.
Is that his paper?
Yeah. All right. It's on academia. Yeah. Let's read it cover to cover and discuss the views he brings in about the culture.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I just think he woke me up, or that document actually woke me up to a lot of reality that you could sense but couldn't touch until
Couldn't
he
put it in
brings it
words.
to the fore. Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Owen.
All right,
Okay,
what do you want to do?
okay.
Keep going, or should we call it
No,
a day?
I think it's time to call it a
Not
day.
much more to
We could
say.
call it, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Aaron.
you, guys.
Iyad,
Thank you.
good night.
I'm
Good night.
Emmanuel. Take care.
Good
Good
night.
night.
I'm
Good night,
Rebecca. Good
Rebecca.
night.
We're
Lee, good night.
Federation X.
See you guys.
See you guys.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys.